To understand any kind of dominant chord, you have to understand what dominant function is. This is the sound of dominant function. Dominant function creates an expectation that a chord will resolve not just to any other chord, but to a specific chord whose root is down a perfect fifth. How does a dominant chord do that? Its inherent structure allows it to do that. There's one dominant structured chord in every major key, and it exists on the fifth scale degree. The structure of a dominant chord is 1, 3, 5, flat 7. That is obviously the root, a major third. Here's the root, a major third, a perfect fifth, and a flat 7. All of those notes in a key, when this is the 5 chord of a key, have certain tone tendencies. In other words, almost like a magnetic pull to other notes. And that magnetic pull, those tone tendencies, make you hear it want to resolve to a specific point. Let's have a look at that, what that means. The tone tendencies of a major scale are that the 1, 3, and 5 are stable when they're particularly in melodic context. That means if we play a phrase and we end on one of those notes over the tonic, it will sound stable. There's 1, there's 3. Each of those could sound like the end of a phrase, so they're stable. The less stable notes are 2, which wants to go to 1, and 6, which generally tends to want to go down to 5. Of course, sometimes it will go up, but it basically wants to work its way to a stable tone. That category of notes are less stable, and they are a whole step away from a nearby stable tone. This last category, though, is the one that we want to focus on for dominant function. These notes are a half step away from a chord tone. So 4 really, really wants to go down to 3. And 7 really wants to go up to 1. 7 is called the leading tone. It's defined as a note which is a half step below the target chord. It's also the 7th note of a major scale. And it's the 7th note of the harmonic minor scale. The note that really gives its pull upward. So 7 really wants to go up to 1. 4 really wants to fall down to 3. So you can remember 4 as fa of the key. Do, re, mi, fa. Fa is the first 2 letters of the word fall. 4 wants to fall down to 3. Now if we isolate those 2 very unstable notes, they are like energy. They are like, or a chemical reaction or some other metaphor you could think of, where energy is stored, and then when it's under certain circumstances, that stored energy is then released. So this stored energy of the 7th scale degree, which corresponds to the 3rd of the dominant chord, the leading tone, really wants to go up to 1. And the stored energy of the fa, the 4th scale degree of the key, the flat 7 of the G7 chord, really wants to go down to 3. And if I isolate just those 2 notes, so T, or the 7th scale degree, and fa, and I let them do their thing, we get the sound of a resolution of a dominant chord. Now that's minus the root motion. When we add the root motion in, the 5th scale degree, which is otherwise a more stable note when it's in the melody, under these circumstances, just like a chemical reaction, when the 5 is in the bass and there's a tritone, this by the way is called a tritone interval, it's an augmented diminished fifth, and it's a diminished fifth, an augmented fourth in this spelling. Diminished fifth and augmented fourth are the same, sound, but this is spelled as an augmented fourth. But this tritone, it's called a tritone because there's 3 whole steps encompassed within the interval, it has a very unstable sound. And when you put this note below it, in this case a G, the G becomes unstable and wants to go down a perfect fifth to the root of the target. So I just played exactly what's on that paper there. This energy is built up by the tendency tones and the 5 in the bass, the fifth of the key in the bass, and then it's released and we get dominant resolution. So to clarify our terms, dominant function is when a chord creates this sound, and dominant resolution is when it actually completes the sound by resolving in the expected way. Now, dominant chords don't always resolve in the expected way, of course, so you can have this kind of thing where it goes to another, the root motion is different, or it goes to another chord. Like, there's all kinds of different ways it can resolve deceptively, but in terms of resolving in the expected way, there's only one way that can be, which is to go down a perfect fifth to a chord whose root is down a perfect fifth, and the quality that you expect in that key. So in the key of C major, we would expect a C major chord, obviously not a C minor chord. So that's dominant function. So if let's sum up the attributes here. First of all, dominant function activates music. It makes, it injects energy. It injects suspense. It injects a feeling of need for resolution. You could almost say it injects conflict, like in a good storyline in a movie or something. And when it, by doing so, then we activate our music more when we use dominant function. It's very possible to write songs that don't have dominant function, but they lack that certain type of energy. They might still be successful, but they're lacking a certain musical ingredient. So what are the ingredients? Well, the chord tone, which is the third of the dominant chord, wants to lead up by half step to the target. That, in other words, that's the leading tone. It's either the leading tone of the key, or it's just a leading tone to whatever the target chord is. It's a half step below the root. So the third of the dominant is the leading tone going up to the root of the target. The flat 7 of the dominant chord, if it's present, wants to go down by step to the third of the target chord. If it's a major chord, it goes down a half step. If it's a minor chord, it goes down a whole step. And under those circumstances, the root of the dominant chord wants to then go down a perfect fifth or up a perfect fourth, where it will land at the same pitch, although it'll be an octave away. So down a perfect fifth, this G ends up on C. Up a perfect fourth, it ends up on C, up higher here. So those ingredients, those are the bare minimum to create dominant function. You can also have the fifth of the chord in there and just add it in. It adds a little bit more energy to the chord, but it's not crucial. So we can take this concept, dominant function, and target other chords. And the next way we do that is with secondary dominants. And secondary dominants target other diatonic chords other than one. This is the primary dominant. This is the primary dominant, 5, 7 to 1. But the other chords that we use for secondary dominants are 5, 7 of 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 in a major key. Now, why are they called 5, 7 of? Because our Roman numeral is trying to shed light on what is the function of the chord. The function of the chord is not just to sit there and be a dominant chord, say on the 5th scale degree. The function of this chord is to create expectation that you will go down to the 1 chord, so that's why this would be called 5, 7 of 1. This chord, in the key of C, would be the chord that wants to go down a fifth and land on the 2 chord. So one way to quickly compute the root of a secondary dominant is to think of the target chord, in this case a 2 chord. What's the 2 chord in the key of C? D minor. So you know that the secondary dominant that wants to target it needs to go down a perfect fifth, so you already know what your target is, so just go up a fifth from the target. And in this case, let's show it on the keyboard. Here's my D minor. And so you just think of, sorry, here's my D minor. And so you just think of the fifth of the chord, A, and that's going to be the root of the secondary dominant because it's going to proceed down a fifth to the target. So let's build so we need an A7 to target our D minor. So I'm going to redistribute these notes a little bit. Here's my D minor. in second inversion, same notes, just redistributed. And so now I'm going to build an A7. Well, we know that we need the A as the root. We know that we need a leading tone as the third of the chord. Here's my target. Leading tone is a half step below the target, so it's that note. So now I have my A, I have my leading tone, and then I need a flat 7, a minor 7th, to fall down to the third of the target chord. So a flat 7 above A is G. So now I have the three crucial ingredients of an A7 chord, and when I let them do their thing, the leading tone will go to the D, the fa will fall down to the third of the D minor, and the A will go down a fifth to the D. Okay, so let's hear that. Okay, you can hear the expectation and then the resolution when everything else is allowed to do what it wants to do. So that's the way secondary dominants work. They use the same energy, but they just target diatonic chords, create these conditions that lead to that diatonic chord. So here's some other factors about secondary dominants. They reinforce the key. They're not there to modulate. They're there to reinforce the key, make you go more strongly back into a chord. They target diatonic chords only. They all have diatonic roots. They always need at least one accidental. They tend to occur on the weak point of a harmonic rhythm, so on 2 and 4 of a rhythmic group of 4. And they support lyrical content. Often they are under action words and lyrics. I'll just play a little bit of a song that uses secondary dominants, and you can quickly see that we're in the key of C. This is 5/7 of this chord in the key of C, which is 6. And if I were to build that chord, first of all, we need an E in the bass. And then we need at least the leading tone. I'll put it down here to voice lead. And we're going to A, so the leading tone must be a half step below the root. So that note must be a G sharp in order to be the leading tone. And then we need our flat 7 there, and that will fall down to the third. And here's my bass note, and so I will get this sound. So here. And here's the actual song.
Some folks like to get away,
5/7 of 6, 6, 5/7 of 4, 4, 5/7 of 2, 2. This is a different chord, flat 7/7. Listen to when the secondary dominants happen, how they create suspense. They create a feeling of a need for resolution, and then followed by the resolution.
Some folks like to get away, take a holiday
Resolution.
from the neighborhood. Hop a flight to Miami Beach or to Hollywood.
And one way you can appreciate that is if I stop on the secondary dominant, I don't let it resolve. So.
Some folks like to get away.
You feel that sense of incompleteness. Okay, that's a short course on dominant function and secondary dominants.